This is CHSR 97.9 FM here in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. This is Python's Paradise, your film and music show, and this is your host, Greg Gilbert, a.k.a. the Python Hyena. And folks, I have a legendary country singer on the phone with me today. Yes, we have the lovely Lacey J. Dalton on the phone. How do you do, Lacy?
Hey, Greg. I am great. I'm up here. I live up in the mountains near Virginia City, Nevada, which is up above Reno in the mountains.
Yes.
And we are having a blizzard up here right now. We've got snow everywhere. It looks like a Christmas postcard. And I've been running around shoveling snow off decks and running down to the store to get supplies because we're supposed to have another big snow flurry another blizzard actually tonight. These are our first snowfalls of the year. It's very, very late this year, Greg. And, we were talking earlier off the air about global warming, and we're feeling that here. We're having, a tremendous fire just a little while ago in Napa, and there was a huge fire over in Paradise, California, destroyed that beautiful place. It was one of the most beautiful places. They called it Paradise, and it was. And it was completely decimated, and I don't know what the death count is now, but it's pretty high. And it was just people just couldn't get out. The fire moved so fast because we've had so much dry weather. So I'm very, very grateful that we've had this blizzard, this afternoon, and I've got a nice fire burning. And I live up about 6,500 feet in the mountains. I live in the Virginia range with about 3,000 of Nevada's beautiful wild horses, and I have a foundation for those horses called Let 'Em Run. And we talked about that off the air, and we can talk about that a little more later. But I am cozy tonight. I've got a fire in the fireplace. I've got plenty of food in. I've got the dogs. The dogs are curled up in front of the fire with me, and I am ready to talk.
Yes. Well, we've already got hit with our first storm of the year. I'm already asking, when's spring coming,
Well, I bet in New Brunswick you guys don't mess around when you get weather.
No, we're always prepared for it, but I feel like Olivia Newton-John in Grease, where she says, how many days until Christmas vacation? I'm like, how many days until spring?
Well, when you get dumped on up there, is it a wet, heavy snow?
Yes, but it can also be like the worst part is driving in it, and freezing rain is the worst.
Isn't that the worst? That's the hardest up here. I live very close to Lake Tahoe.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to go anywhere down in California, you have to go up over a road called Route 80, or down a beautiful, scenic, my favorite road in the world, Highway 88.
Mm-hmm.
Both of these roads in a blizzard are just treacherous, and many, many people die going back up over the mountain to get down to California, to all the stuff that's down there. And we have, when it gets slushy, that's when you see all the semis over on their sides, on the side of the road. We also have heavy wind here in Nevada and in Northern California. Heavy, heavy winds. They're called the Washoe Zephyrs here in the... Reno sits in a deep, long valley between the Sierra Nevada mountains on the west, toward California, and the Virginia Range mountains on the east, toward Winnemucca. And I live up in the Virginia Range, which is high desert, and it's pinyon pines, and very, very beautiful country. I really love it here. When I lived in California for most of my adult life, I lived in the Santa Cruz Mountains, which is they're just beautiful. It's in Northern California. Is just on the other side of the mountains between Silicon Valley and the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very beautiful place with it's a redwood forest. It's actually a rainforest, or was. And I lived there for a good 20 years of my life, and I really feel like it's almost my home. I have a huge extended family there, and I moved out of there when one of my producers in Nashville, Jimmy Bowen, said, "You have to be in Nashville. You must come here," because I always stayed in California and made my music in California. And I was always I was like the weird cousin from California for country music. They all love me, but I was like the weird cousin. And I still am, I still am. But when I wanted to go back, I got so homesick. I lived in Nashville for 8 years, and I don't know if you probably in New Brunswick, you have hotels that are old and famous.
We could probably.
Well, I know in Toronto you do.
Oh, yeah.
And, back in the old days, you would order room service, and it would come under this big, beautiful silver humidor.
Mm-hmm.
And in New York, they still do that. And I felt, when I was in Nashville, I felt like I was under one of those big silver humidors for about the 8 years that I lived there. And though I have wonderful friends there, and I had a beautiful ranch there, I had everything I ever wanted. I had this beautiful house, a beautiful swimming pool, and a beautiful barn, and 20 acres for my horses to run on, and I had tons of dogs I rescued, and I was very, very happy there, but I was so homesick.
Yeah.
I was so homesick for the wide open spaces and the blue skies. Nashville has blue skies, but only in the spring and fall. It's very beautiful there in the spring and fall. The rest of the time, it's just like Pennsylvania, where I grew up. It's just gray.
Yeah.
Because there's so much moisture in the air. And everybody back in my hometown of Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, in the northeastern part of Pennsylvania, we lived in the Susquehanna River Valley there, and everybody gets arthritis. They live to be 1,000 years old, but they all get arthritis, and they're all creeping around,
There you
because of
go.
the damp.
Yeah.
But I missed the open spaces of the West. I was always called to the West, and I feel very much at home in the West. And my music has been very, very, very much influenced by having lived in those Santa Cruz Mountains in California and listening to music of the Doobie Brothers and Carlos Santana and a lot of very incredible, Neil Young and Stephen Stills.
Mm-hmm.
All those people were there. Joan Baez was not far away, down in Monterey and up in San Francisco. And I worked with her sister visiting prisons and doing shows in the prisons with Bread and Roses, an organization that went in to bring music to the inmates. And that's a whole other story, because these last 3.25 years, I have worked in a level 4 prison up in Susanville, California, which is about an hour and a half from my present home, which is up in the mountains above Reno. I work in a prison up there called the High Desert State Prison, and I work for a company called the William James Association, which works in conjunction with the Arts and Corrections and the California Arts Council. And I go up there and I teach songwriting. And I've done it for the last 3.25 years. I just stopped doing it. And I just stopped doing a radio show that I do for My Wild Horse Foundation, which I've done for 6 years, because I have this new project coming out called Scarecrow.
Yeah.
I am really excited about this new music. I've never heard a song like Scarecrow. I don't know what in the world you call it. It's not country, but I've been playing it and a song called Takes an Earthquake Sometimes, and another song called You Can't Tell Your Heart Who to Beat For.
Oh, yeah.
I've been playing those 3 songs, which are my new songs, to my country and my mixed audiences. And I have been I didn't know how they would accept the new music.
Okay.
And I was very, very concerned with playing it, because I just didn't know how it was going to go over. And I have people leaping to their feet at the end of the show. After playing the country hits and playing the new things that I've written and playing some things that I love, there are things I love to play. I have a song called Wide-Eyed and Willin' by a guy named Buck Blackburn, who worked with Stephen Stills and Neil Young and those folks, and who is just this outlaw guy from the Santa Cruz area of California. And he wrote a song called Wide-Eyed and Willin', and I recorded it in Nashville years ago. And I use it now to open my shows. And it's like Colorado country. I don't know how. I don't know what. It's kind of like Poco or something. I don't know how to even, or the Eagles. It's a different kind of a sound, and I love to open my shows with it. And then sometimes I'll do Friend of the Devil from the Grateful Dead, because they were all around.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a bass player that I work with all the time, who was the bass player for the new Riders of the Purple Sage, and I do a song called Last Lonely Eagle that I think is one of the most beautiful songs I've ever heard.
Mm-hmm.
I do a very eclectic show. And some of the things, at first people had resistance to. Now, I'm able to, because I'm an independent artist, which is why most people think I'm dead.
My mom knew who you was.
Did she know?
Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
Well, the bottom line is, I have a bumper sticker, actually, that says, "Who the hell is Lacey J. Dalton?" Because, as many hits as I had, I have to be grateful because I was voted the best country vocalist, new vocalist of the year in 1979, the first year I started, and I went into the North American International Country Music Hall of Fame in 2017. I won 3 Bay Area Music Awards. I've had Grammy nominations. I've had a lot of stuff. I've played on the road. I've been grateful because I played on the road for like a year with Willie Nelson and like a year and a half with Hank Williams Jr. and a year with Merle Haggard, and many, many times other than that.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to go to Europe with Johnny Cash and Chris Christopherson, my very favorite songwriter in the whole world,
Mm-hmm.
Bobby Bare. I toured with the Oak Ridge. I've toured with some of the coolest, most wonderful people. But when I was doing the Bay Area Music Awards, I got to be around bands and actually share crew members with people like Bonnie Raitt and Carlos Santana and Huey Lewis and the News, and in fact, my road manager became Huey Lewis's one of the management partners for Huey Lewis and the News.
It's funny you mentioned that. I reached out to Huey Lewis this year
Did you?
I never heard back, but I reached out for the 35th anniversary of the Sports album because I remember that so well.
Oh, I think he would love to do an interview. I think he's had some very serious health problems.
Oh, actually, I heard he's had problems. Same with Brian Johnson from AC/DC, hearing loss.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what. I can't remember. I believe you're right. I believe it was hearing loss with Huey. But whatever it was, it was very, very serious, and I was really sorry to hear it because what a great band.
I love Huey Lewis and the News, and I especially I remember the Sports album when it came out. I Want a New Drug. What an innovative song, and The Heart of Rock and Roll. And
oh, wasn't that a great? I think The Heart of Rock and Roll may be my favorite.
Yeah. And even some of his lesser-known songs, like I Finally Found a Home, stuff like that is really good. And some of his later stuff, too, like Perfect World, I think Huey Lewis, I think if he's not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, he should be,
Yeah, I'm not sure that he's not, but I certainly agree. I think he's fabulous. I had a close relationship with his. My road manager became his. One of the partners in his management. Lal Halsey is his name. He's a Brit. He's a British guy. And I had just hired him, actually, to help me. And he came to me one day and he said, "Lacy, I've got a confession to make." I said, "Well, what's going on, Lal?" He says, "Oh, I got this great offer from Huey." He calls him Huey Lewis. And Huey was really happening at that time. And I said, "Oh, Lal." I said, "For heaven's sakes, go. That's a much bigger salary and a much better position than I can offer you. With my blessings, go ahead." And so he went. And then I had, I worked with a lot of people, the Doobie Brothers. I actually worked with some of the Doobie Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
They were good friends. They were all in that, I grew up in Santa Cruz Mountains, in the Santa Cruz area of California, which is Monterey and Santa Cruz, and loosely speaking, up in Redwood City and the places where Neil Young and Stephen Stills and there were so many great musicians. There were more musicians there than people.
Yeah.
Really, and you had to refine your craft to a certain degree, even to work. And I had to work because I was a single mother. And so I had to do the best I could do to get as good as I could to keep working, and I worked a lot. And I'll never forget, there's a very famous place called The Catalyst, and I had worked there every Wednesday night for like 1,000 years, And when I became Lacey J. Dalton, they hired me back because my name was different. My name was Jill Croston. And when I got the country career, they said, "Oh, you can't be Jill Croston. Nobody knows what that. Nobody can remember. They remember Jill. They don't. They call you Croston and Cruxton and everything else. Get a new name. We can't deal with this." And I fought that because I knew that would happen. And I liked my name, but I decided, okay, I'll change my name. So I found a name I liked, which was Lacey J. Dalton. And I kept the J there so I could still be Jill for all my friends. Which a lot of people still call me Jill, and I'm cool. I don't care what you call me as long as you don't call me late for dinner, really. I will answer to anything that you call me, and I'm not all upset about that. But I can't remember where I was headed with this. I changed mine. Oh, I remember. I was telling you a story. The guy that owned the Catalyst, who I'd worked for like 1,000 years, I was up there with my new band, and I'm playing this new music, and he's going, "I hired Lacey J. Dalton. That's not Lacey J. Dalton. That's Jill Croston." So arose by any other name. And that's that's how my career's always been. I feel like about this career that I've been trying to carve, claw my way and carve little handholds all the way to the top with a teaspoon in Granite Mountain. It has not been easy, and I'll never forget. I read an article about it was. I remember Betty Davis saying, because people called me difficult. Because I wanted to do the music that was in me.
Well, yeah, of course.
I didn't want to do copy songs and other people's music. The Spirit gave me music to sing to people to help. My whole thing has been, if I can let you know that I've been hanging where you're hanging, and I can reach out my hand and say, you can make it. That's what my music's about. That's what it's always been about. And, I've been where you are. Here's my hand. Take my hand. I have the whole thing, Hard Times, Survivor, The Heart. I can name 1,000 songs. All of them have always been about that. My music is, I'm much more of a healer. I've always said this, and my producers always just hold their ears and don't want me to say it. But the fact is, I've always felt that my job on this planet and in this time, I am much more of a healer and a communicator than I actually am a musical person, a musician. I am more of a healer. That's why I do the music. I want to reach out to that audience. I want to touch that audience. I want them to feel what I'm feeling, and I want them to know they can make it. And they can not only survive, they can succeed. And that I've done it, and they can too. And it's not been easy. And and I know that it's not easy because I couldn't be telling them that if I hadn't experienced it myself. If I hadn't experienced, you don't get strong spiritual muscles by never getting strong spiritual challenges.
That's right.
That's just where it is. I mean, that's just where it is. You are not going to have anything to say to people. For instance, if you are trying to counsel someone to give up drugs, and you've never done a drug, and you don't know what it's like to be trapped in that awful...
Oh, it's about the same as me telling my brother to stop smoking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, how can you do that unless you know the terrible... Addiction is just the most awful thing. Mm-hmm. It's just the most awful thing. And I've had to deal with it in myself, and I've conquered everyone except I have one left.
I do too. I chew my fingernails.
Mine is black coffee.
Black coffee? Well, yeah, we're going to talk about that here. So, yeah, black coffee, yeah.
Nobody should have ever sung that song with me because I swear to God, that's my last holdout for, I know I would be so much better off without it. But, I just love, I have to have it. Got to have that. It's the reason my heart won't even start beating in the morning without a good 2 cups of good strong coffee.
Yeah. Well, I come to contact you through Mike Gormley. Now, how did you come to meet him?
It was a blessing from God.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing with Mike and with my new project has been magic.
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend. well, she's passed on just recently, just a few weeks ago.
Okay.
We were getting ready to celebrate Thanksgiving as our 50th anniversary of friendship.
Oh.
A deep, long, trusted friend. My friend Barry Wilson Crane really got me. She understood me completely. She loved who I was and what I did. And to have a friend like that in this life is the most... I am so grateful to have had her for a friend for all those years. And I just lost her, as I said, a couple weeks ago, right before Thanksgiving, and we were so looking forward to having Thanksgiving with our families together. And we'd just been... she was just one of my longest, bestest friends ever. Before she died, she said, I'm disgusted that your career hasn't happened the way I wanted it to. And she was in the music business. She ran a big guitar string company and amplifier company in California. She was the CEO of it. And, I don't think that was actually her title. I can't remember what she called herself, but she ran this company. And she said, I have a friend, and I went to high school with him, and I want you to go to L.A. with your new songs that you've written, and I want you to record some music with him. And I went to school with him when I was a kid. We have the same birthday. His name is Ira Ingber.
Okay.
And she said he has produced a couple of Bob Dylan records, and he's worked with Bonnie Raitt, and he's produced a Ray Coolidge, and he had Bob Dylan's band for a while right after Mark Knopfler had it. And he is phenomenal. He's a phenomenal musician. And I want you to go down to L.A. You've got to go to L.A. I don't care what you have to do. I'm connecting you with Ira. Ira flew up to see me perform. And he went, I want to produce her. I want to do this. And we liked each other immediately. But our music is worlds, planets apart. Very, very different. I mean, he's like Steely Dan or something. I mean, I don't know how to even... he worked with Lowell George. He was like Lowell's really good friend. They did a lot of stuff together, and he's had that kind of a thing. I'm coming from my country folk background. So our music was really universes apart. And yet, and my friend Barry was gifted, intuitive, a very gifted intuitive, very psychic, and powerfully so. It was a very terrible burden for her. It was hard for her. I've been very fortunate to be in my life, to be connected with some of the most gifted sensitives on the planet, really. And Barry was one of those. And she said, no. She said, you're going to go to L.A. and you're going to make music with this man, and it's going to be magic.
Okay.
So I went down to L.A. and I took my songs down, and we went down to do some pre-production, and Ira and I got along. He is a very beautiful spirit and a very talented orchestral arranger. I mean, he's a truly educated musician. He is a very sophisticated musician. And but he didn't look down on me because I'm not. He understood that I am a healer who uses music. He got that. And he got my music. And the combination of his great finesse and my whatever earthiness and feeling has produced, I think, the best music I've ever made. And I'm very excited, not only about the project, which I'm calling Scarecrow, but also about the song Scarecrow, which I think is the best thing I've ever done.
Okay.
And I'm just getting ready to do a GoFundMe because it's as expensive now to make a CD. Everybody says, oh, it's all gone digital, it's so cheap. It's not. Not if you're not an expert on the Internet. Not if you don't know how to... I'm not a big social media person. I'm actually a recluse. So it's very hard for me to be, out doing social media and doing all that stuff. I live on a mountaintop. I live by myself. I live with my dogs. I do have some people here, but the fact is, I'm sort of a reclusive. And you would never know it. To meet me, no one ever knows that I'm rather introverted and shy. They just don't see that. That's not how I appear. But it is how I actually am. And I need a lot of quiet to restore what I give in a show. Because when I'm giving in a show, I'm really channeling. I'm asking to be a channel. I'm asking spirit to come through. Most of the time that works. Most of the time that happens. And when it does, it's a beautiful experience. And I am so grateful. I have been able to make my living with my music, and it's different. I don't know what you call it, Greg. I don't know how to. The only thing I can call it is Americana. But I had that long career in country. But before that, I was in psychedelic rock and roll bands. I was in blues bands. I sang many kinds of music, and I love many kinds of music. And I think essentially probably you would call me a folk singer of a type.
Okay.
But the new music is Americana, but it's a very sophisticated Americana. It's coming from a combination of my not sophisticated self and Ira Ingber's very sophisticated self. Now, Ira Ingber said, I have a friend, and he likes you. And I said, he does? And he said, yes, he has songs from your first record in his car, on his iPod. And he used to run 2 record companies, and he managed Sting, and he managed Oingo Boingo, and he teaches digital distribution at UCLA Records. And he's like this very hip, cool, incredible Canadian guy. And he wants to come and listen to you while you do your vocals. Would that be all right?
Okay.
And I said, well, he's going to hear a lot of screeching because I'm doing a lot of weird stuff with my voice right now. I'm experimenting with a lot of textures, and I'm not sure how they're going to be good or not. I haven't heard them back, so I only know what I'm doing. I don't know what it actually sounds like coming back, and it might be hideous. And he said he doesn't care. He wants to be there. Mike sat through all of those vocal sessions, all of them, hours. And when he was finished, he said, I want to get involved.
Okay.
So that is how I met Mike, and that's how I met you, Greg.
Yeah. Yeah, I met Mike through actress Lisa Langlois. And after, I'm still very, very good friends with Lisa. And but Mike sends all of his clients my way, and you're the latest. And I don't have too many people I interview that my mom's heard of, but she knew who your name was.
Well, now, I have to tell you, it grieves me horribly to think that the legend has not reached every corner of the known universe, and there are probably only a paltry 100 million people who don't know who I am. But I am thrilled that your mom did, and please give her my regards and tell her that I hope that she enjoys the new music as well as the old music that she may be familiar with.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Scarecrow, and Mike Gormley mentioned this song to me as well. Go into this song in detail, because you obviously worked very hard on this song, and it means a lot to you. So, number one, where's the title Scarecrow come from?
Well, it was an image that came into my head. Now we talked earlier, you said that you had one of those terrible love affairs that just ended with your heart in smithereens.
Yeah.
Well, I had about a 20-year relationship, that about 16 years of which was marriage, and the man was my business manager, and I loved him dearly. And when that relationship fell apart, I still loved him with all my heart and soul. And the breakup was not just a break, not just, oh, he's found someone else and he's in love. It was a betrayal on a whole lot of levels. Financial, he was my business manager, and there were a lot of financial things, there were a lot of things that I never thought he was capable of. I just never thought he would be capable of hurting me the way that he did. I couldn't understand it. I've never experienced such betrayal.
Wow.
And it just absolutely, I nearly died, Greg. I didn't want to kill myself, but the pain was so intense.
Oh, I understand. I can relate.
It was so awful. The pain was so awful that one night and this man was completely involved in my business. He was an incredible sound engineer, very, very astute sound engineer, and we created the Last Wild Place anthology, which was as we were breaking up, we created the most beautiful album I've ever made, which has 17 songs, and it's Americana. It does have some of the old hits on it, but done with my own band, not so differently than I did them, that people wouldn't recognize them or like them, but done with my own band in my own studio with my own husband engineering. And as we were making this, the best music I'd ever made and the most important music I'd ever made in my life, he fell in love with someone else and then lied about it. And that wasn't the end of it. There was more, and what was more was this incredible betrayal of financial things. I mean, I never forget, after he left, I went to the grocery store to get some groceries, and I had $6 left in my bank account. $6.
Oh.
It was such. I thought I would die on the spot. I thought, oh no, after all these years, oh no, that he would do this to me. And it was so wonderful because the girl at the grocery store said to me, I said, my card didn't go through? I said, I don't understand. She said, you don't have enough money. I said, I don't have enough money? And then it dawned on me. Oh my God, I said, my husband, I'm getting a divorce, I'm splitting up with my husband. He must have taken all the money out of our joint account. And she said, honey, the same thing happened to me about 6 months ago. You just take the few things you need. I'll put everything away from you. For you. I'll put all these groceries away. Don't you worry about a thing. You just go and take care of yourself. And it was the most wonderful thing for having that woman was so kind to me. And the fact that she had gone through the same thing just 6 months before I had. And there were many things. It was so strange. My husband left me in a house in the high desert with the well had gone bad, and we needed to get a loan to get the well done. And so I was borrowing heavily against the equity in the house to put in a new well. I didn't have any water. I couldn't sell the house. I couldn't get roommates. We had a huge mortgage. It was a big house and a beautiful house up here on the mountain. During this time, if I told you what happened, this doesn't even sound like could happen to somebody. And someday I'm going to write a book about it. But every appliance in the house broke at a different time. The dishwasher would break, which he bought. He bought these high-end Bosch things with all these computers in. Then the washer would break. Then the dryer would break. Then the furnace broke down in the middle of the biggest storm ever, and I didn't have any wood. I had no water. I had to carry water into here. I had horses and animals, and after everything broke down 7 times, I had thank God for Sears and Roebuck, I had a appliance replacement thing with them. It got to be, I had so many receipts from so many breakdowns of all this stuff in my house that I got to, the repair guy got to be like family. And I asked him, I said, I can have all these things replaced. I have to now because it's been 7 times. Everything's broken. The computers won't work. I said, please tell me. I said, just give me whatever you have that you don't have to repair very much. I don't want fancy anything. I just want something that works. I just want washer and dryer and a dishwasher that just don't, something great, Maytag or whatever, that doesn't break down. Mm-hmm. And, whatever you have, Kenmore, whatever, the old-fashioned brands that don't have, everything has computers. But anyway, so Sears and Roebuck replaced all my appliances. And then my car was I went down to the post office in Reno, and my car was locked, and it was sitting in front of the main post office in Reno, Nevada. It got stolen.
Oh, wow.
They put a thing down in the window, and they opened the door, ran my car. They found it in 3 days with the engine completely destroyed. So I begged the car company to please, I can't afford a car payment. I have no money. Can you please just let me put a new motor in this car? So I had a new motor put in the Jeep, and I drove to Santa Cruz to rehearse with my band down in the Bay Area, Santa Cruz Mountains, my band of 30 years. The car was like half a mile from my friend's big lot where he keeps all his trucks. It turned into a barbecue. It blew up and burned to a crisp. It was a total barbecue. And I asked my friend, I said, can I park this in your lot till they determine whether it's a loss or not, the insurance company? So I was only like half a mile away from my friend's lot. The Spirit took care of me through this whole thing, and I don't even know how. I went then, my son paid for me to go to Scotland to visit him.
Mm-hmm.
While I was in Scotland visiting him, a pipe broke in my house, and the whole right-hand side of the house, the garage and a whole mother-in-law unit, the ceilings fell in. Everything was destroyed. $27,000 worth of repair and
gee.
cleanup. Well, just the cleanup was $27,000, and the insurance company wouldn't pay it. They said it was my fault, which subsequently, a year and a half, I fought them, and I finally won the suit and was able to get everything repaired, and the insurance finally paid for it. But it was just a struggle. Here I was struggling with this car. Here I had put a new engine in the car. It blew up, but that gave me $3,000 or $4,000. It was an old Jeep, and that gave me a down payment on my little RAV4 Toyota car, which now has 202,000 miles on it, and it's still running like a top. And I was able, because the house I put in 3 wells. 2 at 1,050 feet. And I kept running into this stuff that was the consistency of modeling clay, but it looked like sour cream. It was like some kind of diatomaceous earth, and I don't know what else. I should have a mine on my property for that stuff. But anyway, 2 wells of 1,050 feet, $120,000 I had to put into these wells to try to get water to this house because I had no money and no place to go. And I borrowed all kinds of money, and I just went crazy trying to put all this together. Somewhere in the middle of a winter, in a blizzard, I had a fire in the fireplace because I didn't have money to buy gas to keep the house warm. And I'm sitting in front of the fireplace, and I'm seeing this image of a scarecrow. And a scarecrow is in a field in winter, and the wind is blowing, and it's in the Dust Bowl era.
Yep.
That's what my spirit felt like. I was totally destroyed. And the only thing that kept me in my body, I have kids, and I wasn't going to commit suicide, but I was so sad and so destroyed that I prayed, and I said, Spirit, you have to help me. I am not going to commit suicide, but I am no good to you. I am no good to you unless you take some of this pain away. I can't function. I don't want to eat. I lost about 30 pounds in about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I said, I can't eat. Food tastes like clay. I don't want to. I can't sleep. I am so miserable. I just don't know if I just don't know. I don't know. I don't want to do. I don't want to hurt myself. I'm grateful for my life. I love my kids. I love my animals. I can't desert them. But I'm worthless. I don't want to do anything. I don't have the will anymore. I don't have the will to even go on. You have to help me. And for the first time and only time in my life, my prayer was answered in about 15 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't get better. I didn't get entirely better. I just got to where I could deal with it. And it was in that time, sitting in front of a fire in my cold house, which is a big old house. It's a big old cedar house that is put together with pegs, and it rocks in the wind like a big ship. And I love the place. And I was sitting in there, and I hadn't paid the mortgage for months because I couldn't. The IRS came because they investigated me because they couldn't believe I was living in this big house and hadn't done something, wrong. They actually came to my house and took everything apart, went through everything in my house. They ended up giving me $700 back. But the fact is, they would like to have convicted me because I was high profile-ish, and at least in this area. And so I'm sitting in front of this thing. I've been investigated by the IRS for a year and a half. The Department of Agriculture of the state of Nevada prosecuted me. They trumped up all these charges against me because of the thing with Willie Nelson that I told you about off the record. I was telling you that the Department of Agriculture of the state of California was going to kill. They were sending 3,000 of our wild horses to slaughter.
Yeah.
And I had called Willie Nelson, and Willie and Snoop Dogg did a public service announcement for me and put it on the satellite and shut down the governor's office here for 12 days. And I am a hated person here by the Department of Agriculture. They still hate me. And they prosecuted me. They trumped up all these charges and said I did all this stuff that I never did. And so that was going on. Fortunately, the best lawyer in Nevada, who has never lost a case to the state or the feds, stepped up and defended me for a turkey sandwich for a year and a half. The person who defended me against the IRS was somebody who'd been to a concert that I'd done years and years and years before in Watsonville, California, at the fairgrounds. She had been on the verge of wanting to commit suicide, and I sang a song called I'm a Survivor. And it turned her around, and somehow, by the grace of God, she was the person that I hired, and she did a year and a half of fighting the IRS for free for me.
Oh, wow.
Because, my life, I should be walking on... I even wrote a song called I Should Be Walking on Water by now. Because Spirit has, every time I've stepped off these cliffs, every time I've taken a nosedive into hell, Spirit has been there to pick me up and carry me through. Still I doubt, but I'm getting better. And I'm learning that when you are really at that point where I talked about earlier, about standing knee-deep in the river and dying of thirst, and there's going to come a time when you need to decide whether you want to stay in that body and fight or you don't, you need to remember that there is help. And it's what created the stars and what created the sun, and it's not apart from you. It's closer to you than your hands and feet and nearer to you than breathing. And to call on that part of all of us, where we're all part of all that is, that's personal. That's not separate from you. You are 100% made of that. There's nothing to make anything out of in this world except that which is that Spirit that is all that is.
It's
and that Spirit is entirely personal to you and does listen and can help you. And it is the self of yourself. That is my belief. That is how I've survived. That is why I wrote Scarecrow.
It's interesting you mentioned that, too, because it put me in mind of that account in the Bible. You mentioned doubt. And doubt, it's there. We all have it.
Geez, I would have been Thomas. Maybe in a past life I was Thomas.
Well, you know what?
Put my hand out in your side, Jesus. Just make sure that you actually were stabbed.
Yep.
What's it going to take with me? I don't know.
Well, what it reminded me of is when the disciples were in the boat and they see Jesus walking on water, and Peter says, "If it's really you, ask me to get out and walk on water towards you." So Jesus tells him to come out in the water, and Peter, of course, ends up hesitating, and he looks down and he starts to sink. And of course, Jesus reaches out and pulls him up and says, "Why did you doubt?"
Well, I think there's. Remember that song, "Fear's the way we die."
Mm-hmm.
I think just being in the human condition, in a human body, is. I think we're spirits having a sojourn in the material world,
mm-hmm.
and I think at some level, most of us can. We don't quite remember. But we do remember something, and some of us remember quite a lot. And these gifted psychics that I've been very fortunate to have around me for my whole life, they do remember. You know, they've been over there. My friend Bobby, she was in the remote viewing experiments for the government. Those were experiments where they used psychic people to suss out what was going on at other military installations in Russia with the communists and so on and so forth in the 40s. And she was so gifted at it that she was never allowed to leave this country without contacting the government. She was my greatest teacher in my life. And she remembered. She died. Literally, the doctor was signing her death certificate one of the times, and she sat up and asked for food, and the doctor got really mad at her. And the other two times, she said she would cross over and she would go to this place, and there'd be 12 people sitting at this big round, or half a circle, semicircular table, and they'd say, "Bobby, you can't be here yet. You have to go back. You have work to do. You can't be here yet." I tell you, this woman was so gifted that I have a scar on my face, a pretty bad one, from a car accident, and she told me 20 years before I had it. One time she put her little finger up to my face, and she went, oh. She said, "Oh, you have to be so careful with your face." She said, "Be so careful with your face." And I remember her taking her little finger. She's a very amazing person. She had Crest syndrome, which is 7 major diseases all at the same time. And the reason that I got to meet her was actually they called me to pray for her. I used to do the laying on of hands before I did my music career and put the energy that way. I used to perform the laying on of hands. I've been taught to do that. And her friends called me and said, "Would you please pray for her? She's dying, and we would appreciate if you'd come and just at least give her some comfort." So I went and I put my hands on her. And the minute I put my hands on her, I said, "Bobby, you're not going to die." I said, "You're not going to die." And I said, "You're going to be fine. And in about 2 or 3 weeks' time, I want you to come to me, and I'm going to tell you some things to do, some things to eat, and some supplements to take." She actually lived to be 67 years old, which at that time was the oldest living person. She was at the Mayo Clinic, and she was the oldest living person with Crest syndrome. So that's how we started our relationship. And she taught me many, many things. Many, many things. But she was a very, very interesting. She told me my son, she said, when he's about 21, he's going to have a really bad accident, and you're going to think you've lost him. And she said, "But you won't." She said, he's going to pull through, and he's going to be fine. You remember this when it happens. I was up at Harrah's. I was playing at the main showroom in Harrah's. And he came up from Santa Cruz Mountains where we lived, and he was going to be skiing up at Lake Tahoe. And I said, "Hey, I'm over at Harrah's, so, I'm going to be there, so you come over and, stay with me. At Harrah's, I have Sammy Davis' big apartment in the, up in Harrah's, and it's beautiful, and there's plenty of bedrooms, and come over and stay with me." And I got a call, it must have been 1 o'clock in the afternoon, that I needed to get up to the hospital in Truckee, that he had a snowboard accident. He had done a flip on his snowboard, and it hit him at the back of his head, right at the base of his brain. And they didn't really know that he was going to make it or not. And so I jumped in the car, and I went up to Truckee, which is not far from the and I knew he had to be in bad shape because they have a clinic right near the ski slopes. If you'd been okay, he'd have been at the clinic. He wouldn't have been at the hospital. So I walked in the hospital. He's sitting in a wheelchair, and he is gray. And he has such a terrible concussion. And they tell me, there's not much we can do about this. You can take him down, and it'd be better for him to be at a lower elevation. And don't let him fall asleep. Don't let him go to sleep. Try to keep him awake as long as you can. When he does go to sleep, wake him up every few minutes, because he could slip away if you don't. So we went back to Harrah's, and I put him in bed, and my security officer and his wife sat up with Adam all night, and I'll never forget. Bobby had said to me 20 years before, or 15, and he was turning 21. He was just about to turn 21 in February, and I remembered my friend saying to me, something is going to happen when he's just about 21, and you're going to think you've lost him, but you won't. So it was a great comfort to me. And Bobby is really the only psychic I've ever known, the only sensitive I've ever known, who actually could understand time. Mostly, it's very hard because eternity is timeless.
Yep.
Everything is happening right now in eternity. And so it's very hard for them to get a fix on when things are going to happen. And even the best psychics have trouble with that. And I absolutely believe in psychics. I have every reason to believe in psychics because I've had people tell me. I had Bobby tell me I'd have this scar on my face. It was so weird because it was about 20 years later, and we were in a car accident. She was in the car with me.
Okay.
So my life has been with one foot in the spiritual world and one foot in this world, Greg. And I feel like part of what I'm talking to you about tonight is the mission that I had when I came in here, and I feel that it is very spirit-led. I am not a religious person, but I love God with all my heart and soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Jesus Christ is exactly who he said he was, because I don't know of a higher teaching than when Jesus came in, he said, the whole of the law is this: love God with all your heart, mind, and spirit, and love your neighbor as yourself.
Yep.
And that's it. That's all of it. That's what I came to teach. That's the whole of the law. That was Christ's teaching. It was not, if you're gay, you can't come to God. If you're black, you can't be in the whatever church. I mean, that kind of stuff is just, to me, that is so, we got to get over that. This world is not a child anymore, and we've got to get beyond these stupid, petty things that keep us from loving one another.
Yep.
And it's very hard, for me, it's very hard when you see someone, for instance, when you see someone at a position of political power who's doing things that actually hurt the earth and hurt people.
Yep.
It's hard for me to love that person, and I have to really work hard to forgive that person. But the hardest thing of all is to forgive yourself and love yourself. That's the hardest thing of all.
Oh, yeah.
Unless you're a narcissist, and then you think you can do no wrong. But most of us, we look in the mirror and we think, oh, jeepers, did I really have to end up looking like this? Or, I'm selfish with my time, or my heart is hard and I don't give a damn about anybody. It's hard.
When I get like that, I come home and my cat always loves me regardless.
Aren't animals just the most wonderful teachers for us? Aren't they just the most? They give us unconditional love.
Yep.
We don't know how. Human beings have a hard time with unconditional love.
Yep.
I do myself.
Yep.
But I'm always working on it. And I think the best we can do in this life, and like I said, with everything that's happened, Greg, in my life,
mm-hmm.
I should be walking on water by now, and I'm still like doubting Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to be that way, and I'm getting better. I hope that I get well, before I make my transit to the next plane. But the fact is, there's still a part of me with every miracle. If you would ever know, if I ever wrote it down, you wouldn't believe the things. You would not believe what happened. Let me tell you about my house. My house was a $750,000 house, okay? With
mm-hmm.
a beautiful, beautiful house. The mortgage was $5,000 or $6,000 a month. When the recession came, which came right with my divorce, thank you very much,
mm-hmm.
I had no water. I had no way to get water. I had put in 2 wells at 1,050 feet and 1 well at about 400 feet. And the last well produced water for about 6 months and then gave up the ghost. The house still has no water. I have to ship all my water in. But now I have this huge bill of $150,000. I hadn't paid the mortgage. I couldn't pay the mortgage. I didn't have any money to pay the mortgage, and I had no place to go. And I couldn't sell the house because it had no water. And I couldn't have roommates because it had no water. And do you know what saved my house?
What's that?
I dealt with the banks and said, nobody else is going to take this house without water. I've put in 3 wells. You need to give me a mortgage on this house that I can afford, and I'll pay it. And why would you just want to let this house sit here and rot when you can get a mortgage for me? And I had help. I had some good friends help me through the paperwork, and the paperwork was endless, endless. Also during this time, what I didn't tell you is that my goddaughter came to live with me, pregnant, and her felon boyfriend came and stole my identity. All during the same time. All during the same time. And the only thing that kept me going was the fact that I would say, this situation is already healed through spirit right now. This situation is already healed through spirit right now. This is just something wonderful is happening for me. This situation, instead of thinking the negative thoughts, instead of dwelling, and on bad days I dwelled and wallowed. But on the days that I could do it, and I had the strength to do it, and I prayed to get the strength to do it, I would say, this situation is already healed through spirit right now. And I take every thought and every feeling, into the captivity, unto the obedience of the Christ Spirit. And that's how I got through a lot of this stuff, and it worked for me. And still, I still have a lot to learn.
I gotta wonder, your husband had left you. I gotta wonder, when any woman he ends up with, if she hasn't caught on to his little scheme, you got.
Well, I think she may be a great deal like him.
Oh, gee.
To go into a long marriage like that. I mean, and God bless, I hope they're happy. I hope they're happy. I do not wish them anything but happiness. And I never would have written Scarecrow if it hadn't been. Sometimes, I read a book one time, and it resonated with me, and I don't know if it's true or not, but it resonated with me. It said that spirits, I don't believe that we do this just one time. I believe we come back lifetime after lifetime. That is my belief. I don't know that, but I believe that because of an experience that I had. That's probably too long to tell you, but where was I? I think I lost my train of thought here.
You're talking about wishing your exes.
Oh yes. I wish him no harm. I wish him every blessing. I hope they're happy. I hope he's happy. I hope he's fulfilled. I hope everything is good with them. I have forgiven them, and and that was not easy. But I was given the grace to be able to do that. I didn't have it myself, and I asked for it, and it came. And that's another thing. If you can't forgive somebody, ask God's forgiveness to come through you, or creators, or Buddhas, or I don't know what you believe. Whatever you believe, I think there's only one spirit in all that is, and that's my belief. But I don't believe we do this just once. And I believe that we can make contracts with one another. Now, this lifetime, before we come in, you and I are going to have this long marriage, and at the end of this marriage, you are going to betray me so dreadfully that I will be forced to my knees and to awaken my consciousness more to spirit to be able to survive it. And we have this contract, and you're going to do this. I know he didn't enjoy doing that to me, but that's the way it happened. That's what happened. I'm sure he didn't feel good about it afterwards, but that's what he did. And because of it, I was pushed to a point where I was able to write a song that talked so deeply about it that I know other people who've been there can get some healing from it. And that's what my music is about. That's who I am. That's what I'm about. And I just have to continue to be grateful that Spirit can use me to whatever degree to do whatever work I'm supposed to do. And I never know what that is. I don't know what that is until I write it.
Yep. I'm going to tell you, I got to bring this up. Mike Gormley, before he sent me anything with your new music, he had sent me a few of your classic tracks. And I got to say, my favorite one that I heard was 16th Avenue. I really enjoyed that song a lot.
People really resonated with that song. I did not write that song. That song was written by my friend Tom Schuyler, who was also a Pennsylvanian. He was also born in Pennsylvania. And we are good friends. He is a wonderful, wonderful songwriter, and he actually lived that song. He was a carpenter, and my friend Eben Stevens and his friend Hillary Cantor wrote my last hit, Black Coffee. And 16th Avenue wasn't my first hit, but was certainly my most profound. It is my signature song. And I was very grateful. But Tom was a carpenter in Even's studio when that song hit. After that song hit, he formed a group with Fred Knobloch and Tommy Overstreet, who were the three, really at that time, probably the three of the strongest writers in Nashville. And they had a group called Schuyler, Knobloch, and Overstreet called SKB, and they had a bunch of hits. And then he went on to become the president of one of the record companies in Nashville. Tom did, after he had his hits. And after that, after he became the president of the record company, I want to say it was A&M, but I don't think that's right. I can't remember. It's been too long. But anyway, he became the president of the record company. RCA. I think it was RCA. And then he became the president of the International Songwriters Association.
Okay.
So he went there as a carpenter and plying his trade as a songwriter, and went from songwriter to the head of the International Songwriters Association of the world. And I was asked a few years ago to come back. He was being inducted into the Hall of Fame with Garth Brooks and with Taylor Swift. And I think Winona Judd, she performed that night. I can't remember who all got inducted, but he did for sure, and all those people were there. And he asked me to come to Avenue, and so I did. And I got to do that, and it was a great moment for me, and that's been a great song for me. I really am so grateful to have been the artist who just got to sing that song.
Yeah, and of course, Black Coffee. I think I know the story behind that. You tell me you got to have your 2 cups of coffee, huh?
Oh, come on, Black Coffee. Well, and isn't it weird that the career began with at Eben Stevens' studio with Tom Schuyler's song 16th Avenue, and then that's when the career really took off in 1985. I'd been signed in 1979 and was Best New Female Vocalist for a song that I had written with my longest friend, Mary McFadden. And we wrote a song called Crazy Blue Eyes.
Okay.
And that song went to the top of the charts and stayed on, it was in permanent rotation in most country radio stations for years. And it opened the door for me. And but it wasn't until I think 85 or so that we actually ended up having 16th Avenue.
Okay.
So there were a number of years, and before that I was a folk singer for about 15 years without any recognition. Well, I did. No, I didn't win the Bay Area Music Awards until after I got my record deal in '79, and then I won, I think, 3 of those. I was very proud of that, because that was not just with country musicians. That was with all those other folks that I mentioned before: Jefferson Airplane, Jefferson Starship, New Riders, the Purple Sage, Carlos Santana, Bonnie Raitt. All those wonderful, Huey Lewis and the News, the Doobie Brothers, and those were the people that I had grown up musically around. So to be honored by those folks was, and where I had grown up as a musician, was a very important part, a very important thing for me. It really made me feel great.
I got to ask you, you've performed with so many known musicians, and I got to ask some of your stories, like who you loved performing with, some of the highlighted stories of these performances. Do you have any stories there?
I have so many stories, I don't know where to begin. I just don't know where. I'll begin at the beginning. I started, I think the first group I ever toured with was the Oak Ridge Boys, and they only gave me 20 minutes. They said, that's what happened to us. We had to win the audience in 20 minutes. You need to learn how to do it.
Oh, wow.
So they taught me that. And then I went on the road with Bobby Bare, the great Bobby Bare.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget. I'm in this rattle-trap old Winnebago or something, and Bobby's in his bus. And we'd get to a show, and he'd say, Lacy, he'd say, they got a big spread laid out in there for me and the boys in there. And he said, we have the bus, and we have all the food we need, and you guys go in there, and you just, you have at that. You just have anything you want to eat.
Oh, that was nice.
Well, what was really nice is I didn't realize until years later, the first thing, not all people wanted, Willie Nelson wants to stay on his bus because he's got a luxurious, fabulous bus. A lot of them do. But when I had a bus, we called it the Silver Beagle, and the first thing we wanted to do when we pulled into a place is get the hell off it. It was, but Bobby knew where I was. He knew that we didn't have a lot of money, and we were traveling on a shoestring. We had a lot of people in the band and crew. I was paying for a lot of people. I probably shouldn't have. I didn't realize until years later, less is more in that regard. But I had an inexperienced manager who just really worked his butt off and really got my name out there and really did a good job. But he thought we needed to have every single instrument that was on the record on the road. And it was because of his inexperience that we did that. And so, when I was on the road, I'll never forget, I was on the road for over 300 days a year for the first 3 years, and I came home for Christmas and asked for $200 to buy my child some Christmas presents, and he said, you don't have $200. And I said, you better find $200 or you don't have an artist.
Oh, wow.
And that's when I split up with him. But, he did a great job of getting my name out, and he really worked his butt off to let the world know who the hell Lacey J. Dalton was.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a beginning. And then, I toured for about a year with Willie Nelson, who was my great hero and still is a great hero to me.
Mm-hmm.
Willie Nelson is not only a great... have you ever read his book, The Tao of Willie?
I haven't, but I saw him in concert here in Fredericton years ago.
How was his concert? Was it great?
Oh, it was great. The Nitty Gritty Dirt Band opened for him, and then he came out, and it was wonderful.
Well, he's not just a wonderful performer; he's a wonderful spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote a book. It's his autobiography called The Tao of Willie.
Mm-hmm.
T-A-O, Tao. It's really his philosophy, and he just never takes himself all that seriously. But he is such a fabulous musician and songwriter. I heard him on PBS. I heard an old rerun of PBS, and Willie was playing crazy on... He was actually playing the chords that he wrote to the song Crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And they are the most wonderful chords. And I don't know if this is true. There's an urban legend or a myth about that Patsy Cline did not like those chords and was having a hard time singing to the sophisticated chords that were actually written for that song. I find that a little bit hard to believe because she was quite a wonderful singer. But the bottom line is they simplified the chords. But when I heard Willie play the chords that he actually wrote for that song, I was blown away. It's really a very sophisticated chord pattern, a very beautiful one. And what a great song.
Mm-hmm.
Willie always got a lot of flack for having, for playing jazz chords in his country songs. That's why he pulled back into Texas and did Red-Headed Stranger and actually made himself a career in Texas, and then they wanted him in Nashville, but it took him a while.
Yeah.
Which gave him tremendous soul and tremendous, he's got a lot to say. The book, The Tao of Willie, is one of the best books I've ever read and one of the funniest books I've ever read. He's a great writer. His stories are fabulous, and it was great to tour with him. And then I toured with Hank Williams Jr., big tours in big places, in big coliseums and stuff. And the only reason I got the job was that his crew couldn't stand any of the opening acts that he had. No, they couldn't get along with any of them. They would fight, and it was horrible, and nobody could deal with it. Well, when I went in there, I'm not that hard to get along with, pretty much. Well, I don't know if my boyfriends would tell you that, but but the bottom line is, I really try to get along with people. I love people, and so we didn't have a bit of problem with that crew. It was the greatest crew I ever worked with, to be truthful. And Hank Williams Jr.'s stage was the greatest stage I ever played on. There was never, if you did a bad show on that stage, that was your fault, because everything was perfect. He had a guy, we called him Captain Kirk. His last name was Kirk. And he had this huge board that looked like the Starship Enterprise.
Okay.
And there were guitar techs, and there were great speakers, and there was every wonderful light thing that you could ever ask for. And I had a big band at that time, and I did what was essentially a Southern rock and roll show in front of Hank Williams Jr. And in order to play to that audience, we adjusted our show, and I think we had a standing ovation every night for over a year and a half, except for one night where all my friends came in Sacramento. We played the Arco Arena, which everybody calls the Toity Bowl. And that place, Hank did not bring his own sound system into that place, and we couldn't hear. And that was the only night in all the nights that I opened in those huge venues for Hank Jr. that we didn't get a standing ovation. The show was very different from anything you will ever probably hear me do on record. There are some tapes of it, but they were big. I wrote a song for Charlie Daniels. Born on the bad side of a dirty Alabama town, in a clapboard house with a rusty roof and a cold rain pouring down. Yeah. Somebody shot the old red dog for howling at the moon. Somebody said you were born too late. Somebody said too soon. Dixie Devil, boom, 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 rock and roll. I mean, big Southern rock songs. And I also played the hits, which was a delicate thing to try to play Hillbilly Girl with the Blues and then go into something at the end of the song, at the end of the show that was really big like that. I had a wonderful song called Love is a Real Outlaw that Billy Earl McClelland wrote from, I think he was from Georgia. And that song was a very powerful Southern rock and roll song. And I had players that could play that stuff. So that was a wonderful experience and a whole different experience than opening for Merle, because Merle's audience was very much more traditional country than that. Mm-hmm. So I had to adjust my show to actually play in front of Merle. And then after that, I opened a lot of shows for John Anderson with just a duo, me and a guitar player.
Okay.
And that was a wonderful experience. And I went to Europe. I toured Europe with Bobby Bare and Hoyt Axton and Johnny Cash, and my favorite songwriter in all the world, Chris Christopherson. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget going to listen to, we had these huge, big venues, like Wembley and big festivals and stuff. And in between these big festivals, we would play these little tiny clubs. And I went in, I think it was in Berlin, but I can't remember. It's been too long. I went down into this smoky little basement.
Yeah.
And Chris and his band were playing there that night. And they played a song for me that changed now, Chris changed my life twice. The first time was early on. I heard him sing a song called Why Me, Lord? One of the most powerful songs I've ever heard in my life, and it turned me around. It turned my spirit around and got it headed in the right direction. And the second time he changed my life was I was totally sideways with my record companies. I just hated them all, and they hated me. And I just couldn't fit in. It was like I was like a round peg in a square hole, and it just never was very much fun for me. Though I had some wonderful producers that I loved, but I couldn't ever get them to understand. I just didn't want to sound like everybody else, and I didn't want to sing songs about divorce.
No.
I'll never forget this one producer. I was seeing if I was the record company was insisting that I leave the great Billy Sherrill, which I didn't want to do because we were on the crest of a number 2 record, and the record company was being completely stupid. But they wanted me to leave him and go with some other producer. And there's a whole long story behind that, and I'll tell you that someday, but I don't have time tonight. I don't think your listeners could stand much more of this tonight. I don't have telling enough stories. But anyway, where was I?
You got caught up.
What I was trying to tell you about was the fact that I was really sideways with this record company, really angry with them. And I was being very unforgiving, and I was really negative. And I needed an attitude adjustment. And of course, the Lord, knowing me, had to use a baseball bat. And the baseball bat was a song I heard Chris Christopherson sing in a smoky little basement in Germany somewhere. And it was his beautiful song, The Heart. And that song, I actually recorded with Jimmy Bowen a few years later. And it was a hit. It did go top 10. I don't know if it was a much remembered song. It was certainly one that was remembered by me, and I do it in my shows. And I say, if this song, because the lyric goes, when they deal you down and dirty in a way you've not deserved, you'll feel better if you take it like a man or a woman. Because if you let them drive you crazy, girl, they'll shut your business down. Shake it off and get your licks in when you can, because the heart is all that matters in the end. The heart is all that matters in the end. And when I sing that song to my audiences, I say, if there is one person in this audience that hears this song, and if it does for one person in this audience what it did for me when I needed that attitude adjustment, then I would have done my job on this stage. Here it is, by the great Chris Christopherson, his beautiful song, The Heart. And I sing The Heart. And it's a powerful song. It's a powerful, powerful song. And I got to tour with Chris, and that was a very wonderful experience. I remember I played my song Adios and Run, which is a song about a couple of real desperados right at the end of their lifetime. Mm-hmm. And Chris and his wife both cried. And Chris Christopherson said to me, now he was my favorite writer, he and Guy Clark and some of those Townes Van Zandt that wrote Pancho and Lefty. Some of those guys they just wrote so close to the bone. Now, I've had bigger success with other people, but the people who changed my soul were people like Chris Christopherson, and he and his wife both cried. And Chris said to me, I don't mean to be insulting, but I didn't know that a woman could write like that. The greatest compliment I've ever received.
Oh, wow.
The greatest compliment I've ever received.
Fantastic.
So that is, that's been some of the high spots and some of the, I have a great Merle Haggard story if you have time.
Sure, go for it.
I was playing with Merle and I was opening his shows, and we were back east. My mother and my Aunt Janet were living in northeastern Pennsylvania at my mother's house in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. And we were playing somewhere in Ohio. And it was a long way. It was, a long way for my mother to drive at that time. And probably 50 or 60 years old at the time. And she and my Aunt Janet they loved Merle Haggard. I mean, they were like die-hard, crawl through broken glass to see Merle Haggard. And they came out to see me. And that particular night, Merle's manager had come to me, his road manager, and said, Lacy, Merle is really sick, and I don't think he's going to be able to do the show tonight. Can you carry this whole show? And I said, well, I can carry the whole show, but, you know, people are going to be pretty disappointed they don't get to hear Merle Haggard, you know. And he said, well, Merle asked if you would do it. And I said, tell Merle, of course I will do it. Of course I will. And, but I mean, I'm thinking, oh, Lord, you know, how am I going to fill Merle's? You know, that's some pretty big boots to try to, pretty big moccasins to try to slosh about in.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but my mother came, and my mother said, now you're going to introduce us to Merle tonight. And I said, Mom, his road managers came and asked me to do the whole show because Merle's so sick, they don't think he can go on stage. And my mother said, well, and my mother was never like this. My mother was kind of a very respectful person. She goes, well, I don't care. Your Aunt Janet and I came all the way from Pennsylvania in the winter, and we're going to hear Merle Haggard. And you're going to meet, and you're going to introduce us to him. And I said, well, Mom, he's sick. I might not. She said, I don't care. You're going to make this happen for us tonight. That's it. And I said, Mom, I don't know if I can make this happen. And meanwhile, I'm thinking, oh, Lord. You know, because I never bothered the headliners. You know, I think that some of them might have thought I was snobbish or something. I never wanted, everybody wants a piece of them. Everybody wants a chunk of them.
Yep.
And I never wanted to be one of those people. So I always, you know, tried not to be one of those people that just, because I know what it's like myself. You know, I didn't, you know. So the bottom line was, you know, it came time for the show, and Merle did have a miraculous recovery and was able to do his show. So I, you know, feebly went to his road manager, and I said, I hate to ask you this, but my mother and my Aunt Janet have driven all the way from northeastern Pennsylvania, and they just love Merle. They're crazy about him. And if they could just meet him just for a minute, if he feels just good enough to just say hello, I would be so grateful. So Merle had finished his show, then I finished mine, and after my show, I went back, and Merle wasn't in his bus. They had one of those houses that they put on construction sites, you know, for offices and stuff, and it was huge, and they had it all, you know, tricked out for him with a bar and all this stuff. And there were some stairs going up to this place, and I'll just never forget how my heart was pounding as I was walking upstairs to ask Merle, who had been feeling awful, to please meet my mother and sister. So I knocked on the door, and Merle opens the door, and he looks down at the bottom of the stairs, and he goes, why, Lacy, this must be your mom and your Aunt Janet. And he walked down those stairs, and he put his arm around both those women's necks, and he kissed both of them, each one of them on their cheek, and he said, you come on up here into my dressing room. Let's have a drink together. And we went up into his dressing room, and we sat there for at least 45 minutes, and he just talked to them and made drinks for them and made them feel like they were the most important people in the whole world.
Mm.
And that's my Merle Haggard story.
That's a wonderful Merle Haggard story.
That's a wonderful Merle Haggard story. And Merle was a very mercurial person. You know, he was a squirrely little guy, and I just loved him. And I now, you know, I do shows now with his son Marty sometimes, and Marty and I are good friends, and we really like each other. Mm-hmm. And he reminds me an awful lot of his daddy. But there's, you know, Merle Haggard was one of a kind, and just a real truth. Merle, the thing about these superstars like Merle and Willie,
mm-hmm.
they really know who they are.
Yes.
They know who, and I'll never forget playing at Billy Bob's and looking at the wall where everybody signed the wall. And I remember that Waylon Jennings, who was my great hero, I loved his voice so much. I loved Waylon.
Mm-hmm.
Had written on the wall, he wrote, Waylon, by God, Jennings. I just had to laugh because it was so him. It was so him. I wrote a song. One of the reasons that Mike Gormley and I have become friends is because he loved my song, Old Soldier.
Mm-hmm.
And he did not know who it was about, and I never said in the song who it was about. But it was really about the first time I ever met Waylon Jennings. And the song starts out, I saw you last Friday on the big concert stage. The warm amber lights did a lot for your age. I touched the backstage pass. I wore like a prize because I wanted a good look at the old soldier's eyes. And I got a call at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was Waylon. He goes, what's all this about amber lights? I said, Waylon, any idea what time it is? What is wrong with you? And he just laughed. That's actually a true story. Old Soldier is a true story of the first time I ever met Waylon Jennings. But it's been a long and wonderful trip. I am so grateful to have been able to support my music and my life with my music all these years. Sometimes I can't even get my head around the fact that I've been able to do music since I was probably 18 years old. And the really strange thing about it is, my whole family was musical. My mother, my dad played all the stringed instruments. My sister plays guitar and piano and writes and everything. And I was like the unmusical one. I remember sitting, some people will say, yeah, well, you still are. But I remembered sitting under this big oak kitchen table we had at the time. It had a pedestal underneath, and I used to sit between the legs that stuck out from the bottom of the pedestal. And they'd be playing music. My dad would be playing the banjo and the mandolin and guitar, and they'd all been singing. My mother sang harmony, and my sister. And I just sat under there and listened. I remember sitting under there and just listening to the music that was being made, and I'll never forget that my father used to sing a song that Elvis Presley later did called Old Shep, which was a song about a kid and his dog. And in the song, the dog, grows old and dies. And I used to stick my fingers in my ears, and the tears would run down my face, and I just couldn't stand. I still cannot sing that song without crying. I cannot sing. I've tried to do it because it has so much feeling in it, but I cannot sing that song.
Well, you know what? We're coming down close to the end of our time, but I do want to ask two things. Number one, what's coming up in the future? I know you got new music coming up. You got tour or anything like that coming up?
Well, we're starting down in Los Angeles. We're going to do the famous old music place called McCabe's. It's a guitar shop where all the folkies play, and everybody's played there. Pete Seeger, probably everybody you've ever heard of has played at McCabe's. And we're also playing we're doing a release party that's going to be a benefit for the Santa Paula Animal Rescue Clinic, which is a no-kill, no-excuses shelter. That is called Spark, and we're going to do a release party for the EP and a benefit for Spark at the same time at the Ventura Theater in January 19th. So things are going to happen in January. I'll be playing there with Ira Ingber and his band and my accompanist of 10 years, Dale Panay. And I'm very excited. I'm very excited about that Ventura show. I think it's going to be incredible.
Yes, let us know what the name of your webpage. Plug that on here. You've got a web page and Facebook and whatnot.
Well, I'm so easy to find. And by the way, I want to say to everybody, if you want to see me at my crazy best and my daggone dog, go to YouTube and look up Carl the Christmas Dog. It's the thing to do. It's 'tis the season to be jolly. And you can find me at LaceyJDalton.com, LaceyJDalton.net. I mean, it's just LACY and the letter J and DALTON at .com, .net, .whatever. And I'm not hard to find on there, and I hope you'll come visit my house. And we're making big changes. We're going to change that website. We're going to change everything. We're going to do a GoFundMe so people can jump on board and help with this new Scarecrow project. And I'm very excited to be working with Mike Gormley, very excited to be working with Ira Ingber and his band, and of course, Leslie Adams, my general memory.
Yeah.
And before you go there, Python, would you make sure that Leslie gets your physical address, or we can I would love to get you the physical product that we have of the Last Wild Place anthology, which is a thing I made. I started in 2003 and finished in 2006. I added 17. There are 17 songs on it, and I think it's the best thing until now that I've ever done. I want you to have that, and I want you to have our Here's to Hank tribute to Hank Williams Jr. and a CD that we made for the Wild Horses called Wild Horse Crossing. I want to send those all to you in hard, serious, not just low downloads. So we need your address. So if you can get that to Leslie, I'd love to make a present of all that to you.
Oh, I would. I'll get in touch with her. Please sign them for me too, please.
Oh, I will. And thank you so much for all this time. I mean,
oh yeah.
We've been talking for, I think, off the record and on the record. I think this is probably the longest interview ever, but it's been so fun.
I've enjoyed it too. Another thing too, and again, you would talk about the hate to ask, but if you be willing, I would love to be put in touch with Huey Lewis if possible.
I'll see if I can do that. I don't know. I don't know quite how to get hold of Lal anymore.
Okay.
But I think I probably have friends who do. What you could do. His name is Lal Halsey, Halsey, and his first name is Lal, Lol. You could go to Huey's website and tell him that I told you that I gave you the number, or that I gave you the. I said for you to call him.
Okay. How do you spell his name again?
It's LOL, Lal, and he's a crazy guy. He's a Brit. Halsey, Halsey. And he's with that Bob Brown management company. Okay. At least he was. Now, I haven't talked to him in many years, but he won't forget me.
Okay. Yeah, because I was going to celebrate the sports album this year, but again, I understand Huey Lewis has had some problems with his hearing and stuff too, so...
It might be hard for him to even do an interview if he's having that kind of trouble. I don't know, Greg, but I'm happy to... If you can't get through to him, I might be able to help you some other way.
Okay, sure, okay. Because I'm open to doing that, but...
All right.
Yeah, no, I've enjoyed having you on here, and I'm glad that Mike Gormley was able to connect us, and I was happy too when I brought your name up to Mom. Mom knew who you was, so she doesn't know who a lot of people I interview are.
Well, you tell Mom I said to have the merriest, happiest holiday ever, and and many happy returns, and just tell her I know that things are really hard for her right now, and for your dad, and for you, and I just wish you every blessing, and to just know that even though it seems so terribly hard, and this life seems so terribly long, we're not here. This is just a brief interlude in an eternity of beingness, and that this too shall pass. These sorrows shall pass.
Yeah.
This is a veil of sorrows, and it can be, and it's also a veil of great joy, and please give her my love.
Sure, absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Well, and of course, we know we mentioned off air the Doubtfire Face Challenge too. So
yes, now contact Leslie, and we'll get a coconut cream pie or a banana cream pie or some squishy pie and smash it in my face.
Well, the people that you nominate, remember to tell them to nominate 3 people too. I'm trying to get the industry involved. So
okay,
yeah, so get that out there. Plus, this stuff is fun to watch. I grew up with that stuff. So,
I haven't ever had a pie smash in my face, so it should be interesting.
Well, there you go. Well, I've had a few of my guests.
Much.
Before I let you go,
yeah,
I'd like to ask you to do a plug for my show.
Oh, I'd be happy to do so, but I'm going to have to write it out. So what do you want me to say?
Just say your name and say you're listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise out of New Brunswick, Canada. You got all that?
I'm writing it out.
There you go.
I guess I'm slow. Python's Paradise.
Mm-hmm.
Out of New Brunswick,
Canada. Because I guess there's a there's a New Brunswick and New Jersey too. We don't want to mix people up too bad.
Right. All right, Greg. You ready?
I'm ready. Go for it.
Hey, hi, everybody. This is Lacey J. Dalton, and you are listening to my friend Greg Gilbert on Python Paradise out of New Brunswick, Canada.
Thank you so much, Lacy, and God bless you, and stay warm.
Right back at you, Greg, and thanks so much for forgiving me for being late with my interview.
Oh, don't worry about it. I had the whole evening here, so, the snowstorms happen, We get them here all the time, so totally understandable, and I'm so glad we were able to do this.
All right, and God bless you, and angels all around you, kid. Have a great holiday.
You too. You take care.
All right. Bye, sweetie.
Bye.